Good evening. I've been asked to reflect on Linguistics 2 and my experience with it and my takeaways and what I'm coming away with. And already about 15 seconds have been spent just introducing what I'm going to be doing. When I think about the course in general and what my experience was, I think back to that original reflection that we did when we asked, why teach linguistics in week one? And I believe my response had something to do along the lines that well, for one thing, that's really cool. I actually enjoy linguistics because I essentially, want to know like where words come from. I want to know why we use words the way we do, and I also want to teach that or inspire that same kind of motivation in my students. I also talked about how teaching and learning linguistics allows us to teach effectively, because it helps us understand students' needs and achieving fluency and comprehension in English, especially when considering the language index and where people are separated as far as how far removed their native tongue is from English, and how many similarities and differences there are in those two said languages. And finally, I'd also talked about I like the Chomsky point of view, where it's like it sort of understands how the mind works when we study language and how people use language and incorporate it. As the semester went on, though, I really began to think about the importance of oral language and its practice, and and how we need to find those authentic opportunities for ELLs to practice that language. In my PLC group with Wendell Wilson and Nathan Demirsky, we seem to really hit that point almost every week when we talked about it, and especially so when we were talking about phrasal verbs and modals. That really became apparent, because one thing that Folse has referred to is that a lot of times ELLs are mistakenly or misconstrued as being rude or ignorant or whatever the case might be, because of their misuse of the language and not getting the modals in the correct mode, and not getting phrasal verbs in the correct phrases. And that without that authentic practice in oral production, that it really becomes difficult for our ELLs to achieve mastery of those. One quote that actually stood out to me from Folse was when he talks about passive understanding does not equal active production. So being able to comprehend a phrasal verb does not mean that ELLs know it. And so to me, that really hit home. And, in the PLCs, it really hit home as well. Every time that we would talk about, our teaching points and how we were going to get our teaching points across to ELLs, it always came to the production. Where are they going to produce? And really, how are we going to develop those authentic practice situations, and maybe not even practice, perhaps I should just say those authentic speaking situations where they are going to incorporate the language and use it frequently enough that they will develop mastery and fluency. And my biggest takeaway with that being said is that that it's absolutely 100% necessary to have that that piece, that element of the teaching in class on a regular basis. And by regular basis, not just once or twice a week, but, really every day at some point. And the lessons I am going to start developing from now on will have that part where, there will be that authentication, because we'll be having kids, speak maybe with frameworks depending on the level, but, that we will actually talk about why is a rule in place, and rather than just saying that's English, which maybe I think I was actually guilty of quite often in my first 3 years of teaching. That now that I would try and explain the whys and the break down the grammatical structures and explain to students so that they understand that there is a purpose to the language being that way, and that they are really looking to me as not only